hello and welcome to the final NBC summer series for 2023. Today, I acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people who are the traditional custodians of where I am standing today. At NBC, we pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Well, we're going to hear in a moment Joe Stitz bringing a message from Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14, which says, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it."
I'm wondering if you've heard of the old adage that if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. An example that comes immediately to my mind is all the current hype around this amazing dietary supplement. Imagine just eating one gummy a day, and while you sleep, your excess body fat just melts away. That is crazy. Imagine that. You don't even have to do any exercise or follow any special diets. Now, I don't know about you, but that all just sounds way too good to be true in my eyes. And if it's that easy, then why isn't everybody doing it? Hang on a minute though. Photos prove the phenomenal results achieved by the likes of Oprah and other celebrities, so it must be true, right? Not in my experience. In my experience, the greatest achievements in life have come from pure hard work and dedication. Nil sine labore, which is a Latin saying meaning nothing without hard work. And for me, if you put those two sayings together, I believe they're an accurate summation of the passage that we've just heard. So the passage from Matthew is taken just as the Sermon on the Mount is coming to its conclusion. Jesus has clearly explained to his disciples what it means to live as a follower and as a serving member of God's kingdom. Jesus is now seeking a commitment from his disciples and asks them to choose their journey. Similarly, each of us is navigating our own journey, an act where we're travelling from one place to another, and the choices that we make every minute of every day impacts upon the direction in which we're travelling. There is a popular belief that there are many paths to travel throughout life, and to some degree, I think this is true. According to the gospel, however, there are really only two pathways to choose from. Jesus characterises each of these pathways in his Sermon on the Mount, saying that each of these pathways has a beginning and an end. Each pathway has a gate. One is a wide gate, one is a narrow gate. One of the pathways is wide, whereas the other one is narrow. One pathway is popular and has been travelled by many, whereas the other has far fewer travellers. And lastly, each pathway has a destination, one leading to life and the other leading to destruction. Jesus urges his disciples to choose only one of these gates, pathways, and ultimately a destination. I believe that Jesus is also asking us to consider which gate, pathway, and destination that we want to take in our lives. To be able to make the best choice, let's look more closely at what Jesus had to say about each approach. The wide gate is obvious and opens to a spacious pathway that's easily negotiated. The wide gate can be very alluring as it can be accessed from so many different angles, all of which require very little effort or sacrifice. The wide gate appeals to our own physical needs, our cravings, our own assessment of our circumstances, our own beliefs. It seems to be the let's get through life with as little mess or fuss as we can kind of approach. The wide gate opens the way to the path of least resistance, the pathway to sin and rebellion. Genesis 5 tells us that whilst God created all things, it was only humankind that was made in his likeness. He wants us to live by his underlying values of love, mercy, grace, faith, and unity. When these principles are disregarded, the result can be sin and rebellion, which can lead to hurt, pain, depression, and sometimes even death. In today's world, this is evident in the increasing breakdown of foundational relationships, the penchant for instant gratification through substance or social media, and greed. The wide approach, it seems to come more naturally to us, and the human condition means that we struggle to admit our errors and change our ways. This is outlined in Proverbs 14:12, which says, "There is a way that seems right to man, but its end is the way to death." And despite this gloomy destination, it seems to be the pathway that's chosen by so many. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, the narrow approach is not as attractive at first glance. The narrow gate takes effort, focus, and sacrifice to find. It takes the eyes of faith to recognise it, and it takes faith to enter through. Matthew 16:24 tells us that entering this gate takes both self-denial and obedience. The gate is so narrow that there is no accommodation for self-righteousness, an unforgiving spirit, or an overwhelming need for worldly possessions. The narrow gate is the one that leads to the pathway of life, but is often only travelled by a few. Jesus is telling us in this verse that the only way to be saved, to have eternal life, is to pass through that narrow gate. There is no other means of salvation. The only way to be saved is to turn to God through faith in Jesus Christ. This is clearly stated in John 3:36, which says, "Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. Whoever does not obey the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God remains upon him." So, which gate or pathway appeals to you most? Which approach are you currently choosing? So in this verse, a gate describes a point of access to enter a pathway that leads to a defined destination. The gospel tells us that the gate's referring to the choices that we make in our lives on a day-to-day basis, our innermost choices of mind and heart that will lead us to either a pathway of life or a pathway of trouble. I think what's really important to remember here is that the gates can not only provide access to our chosen path, but they can also deny us access to that path. And it's also really interesting that the gate is not a one-time only decision. Romans 8, chapter 5, tells us that ruin doesn't only occur at the end of the pathway, it can occur any time that the wide gate is chosen. The gates are really only, though, the starting point of our journey and onto the pathway. The pathway refers to the road between the two destinations and actually can be a metaphor for our behaviour. So if the gate represents our inner choices, then the pathway represents the manner in which we live out these choices. The way into God's kingdom is determined by our attitudes and actions. And just as the gates are not a one-time only kind of proposition, the pathway is also not permanent or unchanging. If we choose to enter the narrow gate and travel the narrow pathway today, there's absolutely no guarantee that this will be the same in the next minute or even tomorrow. So I think Psalm 1 summarises the characteristics of each pathway quite perfectly. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. We know the narrow gate's not easy to find, and that the narrow pathway will not be an easy one to navigate. It's one fraught with challenges, but we can be assured that in making this choice, we are choosing eternal life. If we choose the narrow gate, the Bible tells us that our pathway will be guided by Jesus. Psalm 32:8 says, "I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go." The pathway that Jesus promotes is a narrow one, but we know that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So in this time of reflection, I want you to stop and think about which gate and pathway are you currently touring down? Is it the one you want to be navigating? Is it the one that leads you to the destination of your choosing? Are you one of the many, or are you one of the few? What's it going to take to change your trajectory?
Light of the world, you step down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see beauty that made this heart adore you. Hope of a life spent with you. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. King of all days, oh so highly exalted, glorious in heaven above. Humbly you came to the earth you created, oh for love's sake became poor. Would you like to stand to your feet with us and sing? So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. And I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. And I'll never know how much it costs to see my sin upon that cross. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus. When the music fades, all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring something that's of worth that will bless your heart. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. King of endless worth, no one could express how much you deserve. Though I'm weak and poor, all I have is yours, every single breath. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it, when it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it, when it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me.
Thank you, Joe, for that message. What great encouragement for us to consider what path we are on and the choices that we're making about whether to choose that wide gate or the narrow gate, and letting God lead us in that way. This is such a great way to wrap up our summer series with the challenge of always choosing the right path. We thank you for joining us for our 2023 summer series. And next week, we'll be back to live streaming our Sunday morning worship services. We hope you can join us then. God bless.